We're live now.
We are live.
The numbers.
Did the numbers sort of people? Well, we are live. Hello and welcome to Hear the People Live. I'm Katrina Collier. You probably know me as the author of the Robot Proof Recruiter, which I shamelessly plug all the time. And I'm a facilitator and whatever else I do, speak, all this sort of stuff. You know Glenn Martin. Actually, I don't know which way to point because he's never on the side I expect him to be on. Serves you right for making me do this intro, Glenn. Wow. Co-founder of Nevermind the Job Spec and all-round awesome human being.
Oh, thank you.
Is that okay? Well, that too.
That's amazing.
Good. Thank God. And today I am so excited to be talking to Jordan Conway, who is officially a herder of cats at Calendly, but about onboarding and probably a bit of pre-boarding and also what you're doing now. So welcome to the show, Jordan.
Thank you. Welcome.
As ever, if you are watching over on LinkedIn, please follow the link to Crowdcast and watch it over here so we actually see your comments and questions and those sorts of things. Usual thing. Can't see anything at LinkedIn. Can you give us a bit of how you got to do what you do, where you are? Sure. Oh, and thank you, by the way, for battling the ice storm of Nashville to be here.
I'm currently based in Nashville, Tennessee, where it is cold and gray, but excited to join and be here. How I got started. My background is actually in higher education. So in the university setting, I worked directly with college students in all sorts of student engagement programs and last in orientation and transition programs. Sort of by necessity, changed and got out of higher ed as an expat of sorts. And landed in the tech sector, first at Lyft, the rideshare company. Cool. I worked for an internal team who helped onboarding drivers, new drivers, and I did all of their training and engagement and onboarding work. Transitioned to a larger people team to do boot camps for internal teams. So I built a boot camp for recruiters, and then was recruited by Calendly to do their company-wide onboarding. I did that for
obviously the only calendar tool to use.
Yeah.
Which you will already find on my website. I love it. I love it. I've been using it for years.
Yes. And then I've done that for the last 10 months and then was recently promoted into the engagement manager role. So I'm still over onboarding. And then my scope has increased to include company-wide engagement initiatives. And I'm really pumped about it. I love onboarding. So excited to stay in touch with it and then sort of see what else we can do to spice up the rest of our engagement initiatives.
Very cool.
Why do you love it?
Why do I love it?
Why do you love onboarding?
Yeah, I think work should be fun. And we spend a lot of money and time in higher education focused on the student experience. And then students leave and they get their first job and they're kind of like, the corporate world is not as great as everyone. Like adulting is terrible. I am on a mission to make adulting more fun. And I think we can do that through engagement and working with managers and teams and how we help them have fun at work and get a lot of really cool stuff done at the same time.
It's an interesting one. Makes me think about that transition from education to the corporate world and how there is a perception, I think, that obviously kind of degrees in the UK are being devalued because ultimately you go through the education process, you're empowered with the education you have and the knowledge. And obviously the idea is that creates the next step for the corporate world. And then you kind of touch the corporate world and they're like, yeah, so you got a degree. So what?
Yeah.
So what?
We don't care.
Else? Yeah, exactly. What else you got? What other skills can you bring? How can you make an impact without any commercial experience whatsoever? And I think, it's always been a consistent challenge, I think. But to your point around kind of the onboarding experience, it's like, okay, cool. How do I make somebody feel valuable now that they've secured this opportunity? How do you make people feel valuable, Jordan? What is the key things that you do to make people feel valuable in onboarding?
You said your head wasn't working. It seems to be working just fine.
I know.
What a curveball question. He usually waits 45 minutes before he does those, by the way.
Yeah.
This is our special.
I'm ahead of time.
I love it. I like to create intentional experiences for people. It may be a little bit of a cliche, but being from the South, I like to think of onboarding as the front porch of a house and how you welcome folks into the house and greet them. Usually there's like cookies and lemonade and you want it to be fun and engaging. And so for an onboarding experience, being really intentional about the activities you do, how you set the tone for culture, sort of welcomes them onto the front porch, into the house where they meet their teams and they're having a really positive experience and like want to be a part of the community in the neighborhood. And so like I sort of paint that analogy and use that when I talk about my work, because I think it's missed. A lot of other orientations can be strictly HR content, which is super important. And we need our folks to do the things and herd the cats in that way. But I know benefits are still important, right? And 401ks are important, but how do we intentionally spend the time we have together doing activities that matter and teaching them about each other?
I love that idea, because just playing on that kind of theme of kind of HR and the experience you're trying to create, the HR approach would be, I turn up to the front door. Am I at the right front door? I'm not entirely sure. I've been given this address. Door opens. You're shoved in a room with a clipboard and a load of stuff. Fill this in, and then you can meet your colleagues. Whereas from your perspective, you're trying to create this like, I kind of know where I'm going. You can kind of see the house as you're coming up the street. You're already excited about the people that you're going to meet. So knocking on that front door, you're not feeling apprehensive. You're actually feeling super excited and engaged already, because you have a sense of what's beyond it.
Cool.
Yeah, I like that.
How do you do that in a remote world? Did that have to change over the last few years, or?
Well, I think to your point, Glenn, it's twofold, right? Like we've asked HR professionals to be creative in a way that they haven't ever had to be before. And I think that's sort of born or produced the engagement function in a lot of areas, or experience function. So we're working with HR as partners and saying, you're the knowledge, you're the experts, right? So how can we leverage that to turn this into an experience for them? At Calendly, for our virtual onboarding experience, we use an email automator tool called Sora, and we build in automated communications that start from the second they get their offer letter, and they hear from us 1 to 2 days. They get information, little tiny like tweet sized bits of information that sort of build up to their very first day and setting that schedule. So it's not one email with a million things in it. They'll just get one about their computer, one about ordering their welcome kit, one about the schedule for the next week.
That's so cool.
They can sort of digest it and revisit it at their own pace.
I like that, because then they're constantly feeling like they're part of you, little bit by bit by bit by bit.
Yeah, and they're branded. We embed videos. We link out to our blog, so they really feel like they know the culture and what to expect. And there's emojis. It's fun. That fits Calendly's culture, right? But if you have a more formal culture, a more formal setting, there's still a way where you can sort of infuse fun in that experience.
Yeah. Actually, I had a hilarious conversation yesterday around that theme, and Glenn and I are similar age. And we've seen the change in work attire and all this kind of stuff in the last 20, possibly 30 years. And it was like, so what is somebody supposed to wear to an interview these days? And it was just like, it was always a suit, and it's obviously it had already changed. And then on top of it, throw in the pandemic, when most people are like only wearing something nice up the. And it was just quite a bit of fun about that. What you're saying with the fun and the shift in the.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
We conducted interviews to backfill my role, and I referred someone, or I knew the person going through the process, and we got on the camera, and he was in a suit, and I was like, oh wow, you dressed up for me. It felt very awkward, right? I just expected him to show up in like a sweater or a button up. So I agree, it's an interesting kind of shift.
Do you think there's some unconscious bias now if somebody does turn up in a suit or overtly smartly dressed? Do we now think, do they fit our culture? Yeah. Do they, do you think there's a danger that unconscious bias can creep in? Because I had to check myself for that. So I'm just kind of like, I would expect somebody like you to just kind of turn up, top, t-shirt, whatever. So if somebody turns up in a suit, I'm like, okay. Okay, so this is pretty formal, right?
Actually, that could promote a bit of ageism, couldn't it?
Sure.
For sure.
For me, I'm like, I'm like impressed that they dressed up, because I think working from home, I'm lucky if I like brush my hair and put on.
You did just for us today.
Yeah. I work in Crocs. I know that's probably like very taboo. I am a big Croc girl, so I think it could, but I'm trying to know the person and their skill set and see if their values fit and not just judge. Sometimes we don't even turn our cameras on. So,
well, this is the thing. Us collectively as people, we would check that unconscious bias and push past that.
Yes.
Perhaps certain hiring leaders might not check that unconscious bias.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, I mean, I'm kind of digressing slightly.
No, but we're not, because it's the start of that employee experience, pre-boarding, onboarding. But actually yesterday, again, in the collective, further into this conversation, it was quite funny because one of the, I'm trying not to say names, one of the women in there who's from the Netherlands was saying that they had an email go around, this is pre-pandemic, about please make sure you put your shoes on, because apparently people would just walk around with no shoes on in the office. And so someone would come in for an interview and they were concerned about how that would be perceived. And I was like, that's actually really funny. I'd be right at home in a place like that. Whereas others would be like, oh my gosh, they have no shoes. Tell me they don't go to the bathroom like that. It should be quite funny as well. So I think we're pro the fun.
Yeah.
Always.
Definitely. What's going on over here with Danny, Glenn?
Oh, Danny and I are about to fall out about sports brand advocacy.
Is this because you're advertising Nike today?
Yeah. I mean, we'll take that conversation offline, Danny. The pros and cons of Nike versus Adidas. But anyway.
Goodness. Did you see that brilliant video? I reposted it yesterday. My repost of a LinkedIn post went nuts, which never happens. It was quite weird. But the fantastic comic in India who one of the things she was talking about was the swag that companies send, and that she's all about the layoffs. I don't know if you saw it. It was very funny. She's going, you know, I walked around the streets advertising for you in all of your swag. And she mentioned every single thing that ever gets sent out. And then you just tossed me aside. It was just, God. Next company, no swag. It was quite good. It was quite good. So where do you, in your experience, if you've looked at other companies, I don't know if you ever compare, but do you see where they usually go wrong with the whole onboarding? Is there a spot where you think, gosh, they should have started that earlier, or do you have any top tips on where we should start? I mean, obviously, you know, I think pre-boarding, but.
Yeah, I honestly was going to say that. I know like a lot of HRIS systems have a lot of great automator tools built in, but they're very limited in their formatting or branding or frequency that you can send out information. So I think the more touch points that you can have before they start, the better, especially if you were in a field like engineering or tech and you have a start date that's like 8 weeks from their offer date. How can you continue the conversation so that they don't rescind their offer? Because then that gives their current company time to, you know, sweeten the deal essentially and kind of steal them back from you. So the more touch points, I think the more personalized, the better. If the hiring manager can get involved and send a welcome video, a welcome email, that makes a world of difference, I think. And then again, being intentional about week one. I see a lot of companies trying to cram everything into 1 to 2 days, just because one, that's sort of been the standard, right? Like that's the standard experience we've been used to. And it sacrifices the least amount of time for maybe other organizations like support or recruiters who have a very regimented boot camp that they typically follow. But being able to push back a bit and letting that first week just be for company content, whether it is front loaded or back loaded, or you do something every day like Calendly does, and complementing that with a checklist or an e-learning so that you can still build off that knowledge without overwhelming the learner. Starting a new job is such a huge experience in itself. And then you're drinking from a fire hydrant, trying to digest everything, also elect your benefits, and then like be a human being. It can be a lot.
Yeah. I mean, just that feeling of that walking in and all of the new names. Yes. And then things like, well, God, what if I need the toilet, or what if I need some food, or, you know, what's the etiquette here? Because every company has their own, you know, sort of style.
I was thinking about like, so that's great for kind of medium, maybe enterprise scale companies. What advice would you give to kind of startups at like 5-6 people, you know, base minimum, right? If you do nothing else, just try and implement these very easy things to help somebody feel like they're being onboarded, as opposed to day one, hey, here's your laptop. This is the room that we work in. And everybody's head down and working. Yeah. Are there any kind of micro things that you think, actually, this is really easy to implement and it could be super powerful for that new joiner?
I still think the communication piece is important, no matter big or small. I think your manager, whoever can, if you have the capacity to send out some touch points and just check in on the person. Calendly's first core values start with human, and it sounds so corny. I'm like a company gal, but I really believe in that, starting with human and putting the human first. And so even in a small company, what information is really critical for them to know about your company, where you've been? Is it funding? Is it investors? Is it the software, the tech stack? Just giving them little bits of information, letting them meet the IT person, and letting the IT person come in and share. Can they meet with the other exec members or leaders of your company to have a quick coffee chat? So I think it's definitely scalable. It doesn't have to be very regimented or built out. But I think getting them exposed and interacting with the different folks in your company will help them sort of build those relationships and feel welcome.
What do you do if the managers don't want to participate, which happens? You know, I'm too busy, I can't possibly have a coffee with you. What have you done when you've come up against that? Or haven't you? A Calendly so amazing that they're all there.
I wish, right? I think that's where your people team can lean in. Even in a startup, hopefully you've got at least one person, even if they're doing all of the things, right? They're doing recruiting and HR work. They wear lots of hats. But if they've got some time to schedule an email or use a tool that will automate it for them, having them sort of step in and send the welcome. Or is it the recruiter? Can the recruiter step in and help? I got several emails from my recruiter at Calendly just saying, hey, is there anything I can help you with? Any questions I can answer? Hey, just want to let you know your background check came back clear. Like just any sort of little updates and touch points, whether they're using emojis or a smiley face or just kind of checking on the candidate and along the way. And hey, how's your first week going? I think that makes all the difference.
It's funny, the emoji thing. I'm really pro it. I think because you can write one sentence and the tone of it, you don't know what it is. And one emoji will tell you, oh, okay, she's joking or she's not. You know, it's like, I think they're really quite important. Other than obviously, seriously, Glenn, back in the room. I'm sure that you and Danny do not need to be having a debate in the comments about what you're wearing.
Yeah, well, I mean, these are important things, right? As you were talking about that, I was thinking, playing devil's advocate, have you ever kind of implemented an onboarding idea that you got slightly less than positive feedback on? So something you just thought, this is going to rock. And then a few people have come on board and gone, oh my God, that did not work for me.
What was that, Jordan? That was wrong.
Yeah.
No.
Because I'm always interested. Just to give some context, I think when I was trying to calibrate with one of our clients, the onboarding, a couple of people came back and said, look, the kind of outreach and message engagement was good, but it was just a bit too much. It was just too much for us to kind of consume before we kind of joined. So something along those lines. Have you had that kind of experience at all?
We haven't, as far as like too much communication, not yet, but I intentionally did a lot of emails on purpose because I wanted that feedback to be totally transparent. Generally, onboarding ideas, I have crazy ideas all the time that I'm like, hey, we'll just try it. And then it's a train wreck and it doesn't land, or the directions weren't clear, or the leadership is like, this will never work. We don't have the resources to implement it. And so it's how I just get creative and either try and fail anyway. And I learn a whole lot and fix it. Or I throw it out and try something else. And I think that is the beauty of onboarding, is that you always have new people to come in and experiment with you. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
And have you been able to sort of track the results of doing this properly? Because I know one of the stats I've got somewhere in my book is that it's something like a third of new starters, if not higher, decide in the first week if they're staying or going. So I assume you've conquered that.
Yeah, super important. We have a week 1 survey and we ask them for all the feedback on our IT team, how do they get their laptop? Did they like their pre-hire comms? Did they enjoy the content? So that's a little meatier of a survey. The rest are very short and sweet. We survey it 30, 60, and 90 days. And we also have their hiring manager fill out a form on them at 30, 60, and 90 days. And then we're hoping to implement a tool where we can also survey their peers at 45 days in to see from a peer's perspective how they're doing. It gives us a lot of quality of hire data, not only for our recruiter team, but just in general of how they're doing. Is there any changes that we should be making on our end, or should we be training managers differently on the hiring process and onboarding process? But that helps us get a feel, a barometer for how they're doing.
That's really cool. I haven't heard of too many companies doing it that much.
Yeah,
You're
I think
wrong.
it's very short, 5 questions or less, because managers are busy, and then when you get into your role, you forget about me in onboarding land, and I totally get
So
it.
who was she?
Yeah. Try to let them know, like, feedback is love for me, and I really mean that. And I can't make onboarding better. We can't make Calendly or the company better if we don't hear from y'all as participants. So needing that feedback is critical.
And you must have built the trust as well if they're prepared to fill that out.
I try.
Again, I was going like, I don't know if I'd be that honest, but I guess if it's an open, trustworthy culture in the company.
Yeah. And Glenn and I were talking a little bit about that, is just how transparent I feel like our leadership team is. I try to embody that too in the onboarding experience. They also have several touch points in their first 90 days with our exec team. And I tell them, I'm not just saying this in onboarding, that our team is transparent, that I'm transparent. I bring myself to work every single day. We really do believe in start with human. And so if there's a question that you want to ask, please ask it. And if I don't know the answer, I will find someone who does and circle back.
Yeah. There's something so empowering by admitting you don't know.
Yes.
I've had that happen on stage, and they, you give a presentation and then they ask a question that's not even related. And it's like, so I'm so often going, anyone here answer this? Get the audience to answer, because I'm just like, what a question.
Experts. Yeah.
Yeah. I just was talking about, and I think it's just being honest, isn't it? And people then love that because of that vulnerability that goes with it as well.
Yeah. So we're talking about onboarding. Is Calendly as good offboarding? So when people come out of the other side, how do we start with well, not Calendly, but what's your thoughts on kind of offboarding? What kind of experience?
I mean, surely you should do it like Google did to that engineering manager who'd been with them 20 years, and they just shut him out of the system. I mean, isn't that how you do it?
Yeah, this is where I'm also going to say I don't know, because I don't run that process, but I do work very closely with the folks who do, and they start with human every chance they get. I think it depends if they're voluntary or involuntary terminations. There's a whole, lots of layers.
There is probably a lot more HR rigor that needs to go into offboarding, depending on the individual's kind of circumstances and why they're leaving. But to your point, I think some of the key things are just making that person feel like it's still a human. You're still, kind of respect. Yes, you're leaving, but we still respect you. We still value your opinion. We still want to keep in communication with you. We don't want it to be like, okay, you're in notice period. Bye. And I think that's the piece that, if I'm honest, most companies get wrong. I mean, some companies don't even bother with an exit interview. It's just like, oh, we'll have a farewell lunch.
I had one.
And that's it. And it's of like
the toxic toilet that we both used to work at. I had one. It was in the lift, or the elevator, as you call it. Oh, we hear you're leaving. That was my exit interview. And when I resigned, my team leader and his boss were not talking to me. It was just like, and it still makes me angry that they treated me like that.
I think from a human perspective, the exit interview piece is important. And even from an engagement perspective, I think that's something that we've wanted to build out. It's just some guidelines around how to let your folks leave with grace. Do you want to host a happy hour for a farewell? What's appropriate? Can you, if you're virtual, get a Google slide deck together so folks can sign it and share memories, or how do you make that a positive experience for them, especially if they did a lot of great work for you and have contributed to the team? And because they could be a boomerang, they could come back, and you want to make sure that they don't leave with a sour taste in their mouth. And I do think that exit interview piece, from an engagement perspective, that has a lot of really great information and meat and potatoes to it, especially if your business partner or whoever's conducting that interview, if you have an opportunity to ask questions or get questions on the list of things they ask, they'll give you a really honest perspective of how the culture was on their team. And
totally.
And you're right. And then there's the knock-on impact. So Louise has written here, particularly with the alumni network, establishing that, but also that they're going to go, which I couldn't do back then, and post on the internet. And they mightn't just post on Glassdoor. I mean, recruiting hell on Reddit is a great place. Lee and Tracy, we are over at Crowdcast. I can see you've written comments on LinkedIn, but you'd be better to follow the Crowdcast link and come over here, because I can't reply to your lovely comments. It's so weird. When we're live, I can't reply. You're getting lots of here's from her.
Okay.
I agree. I mean, there's the boomerang, there's the alumni, or just general advocacy for the business. And if somebody can leave as a genuine advocate for, others to say that company, that group of people, that company, that was time well spent for me personally. I would advocate for you to do the same if you're at that, whichever stage you are in your career. And I think that's kind of almost, that's an investment of time that perhaps very quickly the business, we can't invest too much time in that because ultimately we're moving forward.
Crazy.
But it's almost paying it forward. The investment of that time in that individual or individuals is so worthwhile, and it will pay dividends. Like you say, alumni, boomerang, advocacy. Three things that if you ask somebody, a leader of a business, would you want somebody to be one of those three? They'd be like 100%. Okay, cool. Well, then you need to look at certainly offboarding as something that's a priority as much as onboarding, right?
And your customers are watching. So if you don't have positive things to say about where you left, that could impact your sales cycle, all of the things. It's not just talent that keeps an eyeball on LinkedIn posts. Folks want to support and get behind a company that treats their folks well.
Yeah. That is so true and so often overlooked. Really quite amazing. And actually, you said something before we came on, which I think you'd love to refer into all the layoff companies. But was that if your recruiters are a bit quiet, you look for projects for them? You were talking about what happens. Well. I know we were going to talk about onboarding, but it's just so exciting that you do this.
Yeah, our team, we haven't implemented that yet. We're still sort of waiting on what our headcount numbers are, but we saw some great articles on LinkedIn that other companies were doing this and looking for project work and stretch projects for recruiters that had interest in skill sets that were either like people team adjacent or in other teams and industries. Because I think even like tech recruiting, so much about coding and software and organization and project management, all of those things can be leveraged in other areas of the business as a recruiter, and they should be. If there's space and time and we need headcount and we don't have money for that, can a recruiter step in and fill that role temporarily?
Yeah. I mean, there's some really obvious stuff as well. Like, so as a recruiter going to market, you're looking at the channels you're using and kind of really assess those channels. Are they still relevant for that particular talent or group of talent and pool of talent you're looking for? And with the, even with some of the native analytics you can get off of social media platforms now, you can start to build an idea around, a potential project. So recently, we internally we had one of the team kind of basically focus on a particular role, go multi-channel, look at all of the kind of groups that they could go in, refresh on content, followers, influencers, data around that. Now, that collectively is a super valuable project that can be utilized going forward and repeated for other kind of talent pool verticals, right? So I think definitely companies need to think of kind of talent acquisition, recruitment, HR beyond the I guess the established functions that they serve within the business. You know what I mean?
They do more than just recruit. It's basically what you're saying, isn't it? I also 100%. Think of the sourcing skills that many in-house recruiters have. Imagine teaching some of that to the sales staff. Yeah. Who perhaps, sorry, my dog just jumped up. Who perhaps don't, he's been quiet this week though. The other week he tuned in. It's like, thanks for that. But yeah, I mean, I think about some of their geeky sourcing skills and just how they could unearth really interesting stuff that they could then use in the sales conversations. That could be quite fascinating as well.
And I also think as well, as part of your role as a kind of certainly talent acquisition recruitment now is talent brand building, right? That doesn't have to come with a particular budget, to your point, Jordan, right? Some of this stuff can be done for free, right? Creating content, you're in the environment, you're around people. You can start, we do like a content jam every week, right? We all get together, half an hour, just drop loads of ideas onto a kind of jam board just to essentially sort of build a content plan for the week. And then we can go off and research the things that need, kind of longer lead time. But that, for me, is fundamentally part of a recruiter's job, is to continually be looking at feeding the kind of talent brand awareness. Because the employer brand is the stuff that you can put money towards, right? You can pay, you can create some really great content, etc. But the talent brand stuff, I think something you have to be a little bit more creative and imaginative when it comes to that,
Yeah, 100%. So when there's so many options, I think we've seen this shift in the market recently so that it's not necessarily a candidate market anymore because we had so many great folks enter the talent pool, voluntarily or not, right? And so when we be more strategic, we have an employer brand team that works really closely with all of our amazing recruiters to do both, sort of build the content. We also have an internal influencer academy. So folks like myself that are excited about Calendly can post content that's been created either by recruiters or by our employer brand team to boost not only the brand of Calendly, but can we talk about remote first excellence? Can we just talk about general like interview resume tips? Our recruiters are fantastic about sort of hopping on LinkedIn or whatever platform and sharing tips.
Which is cool. So how's it going to work now? You've got this bigger, so as employee experience, are you working closely then with your employer brand? Like how's that working?
I'm very lucky that we're on the same team and also great pals. So that helps. Actually, Joyce is fantastic. She's our manager of employer brand at Calendly, and she's got a fantastic lead underneath her, Katie Agresto, and they're just the dynamic duo. They certainly help. They look over all of the materials we send out for pre-boarding. They help put together our starter kits for new hires and have curated this like really wonderful experience because we talk about the pre-boarding and pre-hire phase, that constant contact. And so they ensure that it is an experience and they get a taste of Calendly from the second they sign their offer letter.
Yeah.
Very cool. How long does it take and what sort of budget are we looking at for that? Because I was thinking about that when we were originally chatting. You were like, well, no, I'm just kind of get an idea, right? Because I was thinking video content, that's got a lead time on it. And you've got to get kind of hiring manager buy-in, right? Some hiring managers, leaders are just like, I am not being on video. I'm not recording my voice. I will put together an email. When in actual fact, they could be a really significant leader in the business, which you kind of almost need more from them. You're just kind of like, look, an email ain't going to cut it. We want more from you. So I'm just thinking about what sort of timeline.
That's two different questions.
I know. I'm just
how do you
chucking them out there.
them, and how long does it take?
I want to start with how do you persuade them then? Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
I mean, how do you get slightly reluctant leaders to share yourself, share more about yourself?
I know. Yeah, Danny, emails are boring. I think it goes back to the data, right? How can I pull data from like articles or white papers or accredited organizations that showcase the importance of all of these metrics we have about pre-boarding or hearing from their manager and showing them an example, having them hear a testimony from someone we've piloted it with, helps get them on board. I had managers record sample Loom videos or welcome videos so that they have a template to go by. Cause it's like, hey, do this thing. They don't have any direction or any sort of like reference points. So making it a little more accessible, especially for folks who might be older. I mean, we're talking about pre-boarding, and if we use Mac computers at Calendly, and some people are used to PC. So just like getting that new computer and navigating the software can be overwhelming in itself. So giving them a guide that's click and shoot, very easy to do, helps ease that. I think from a budget monetary perspective, it just depends. I mean, our chief people officer is great about experiences and wanting to wow our people, and we so appreciate that. But that does come at a higher price point, right? So if you don't have that to spend, I love snail mail, and if you have your address, like, can you send them a handwritten note? Is it like some fun stickers? People love stickers for their laptop. So just getting really scrappy and creative and how.
Okay, smartass. I wasn't thinking of mine. I was thinking of one of the stories in mine. So Ellie went for an interview, was having a conversation with the CEO about a book, and after it, the CEO sent her a copy of the book. Wow. And that's what sold her on the company. Obviously, there's also the Robot Proof Recruiter, where I donated my royalties to charity. Right. You can now read out Matthias's comment just to shush after that little.
Matthias, hey, Matthias, how you doing? Yeah, influencers. I like the idea of an internal influencers academy. It feels fun and cost effective. Do you think it can work for smaller startups too? And what sort of benefits, incentives, employees could you get potentially?
Yeah, I would love to connect you with our team. I think off the cuff, yes, I think it could work. To Glenn's point, if you have a room for a content jam so that it's not just one or two people responsible for building everything out and putting content in like a Google sheet or an Excel sheet, it doesn't have to, we use dynamic signal. It doesn't have to be that expensive, or you don't have to use a fancy tool. You can get really scrappy with it. benefits for employees, they grow their social media presence. And if, that's important. If they want to be known on LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook, whatever it is, that really helps. It helps build the brand.
Totally.
We enter folks into a raffle for gift cards, for Amazon gift cards, or whatever that looks like. You know your people best and what they like. Maybe it's like a DoorDash meal. Maybe it's extra time off if you don't offer flexible time off or limited time off. You can get really creative with incentives. People go crazy for stickers or swag. I mean, you name it, they'll figure it out.
Yeah. One of the easiest ways as well is to have a corporate hashtag. So, if you're just randomly sharing a photo on Instagram, you've got that hashtag, and then people can find that and repost it because it's a public post. It's like really easy content.
And one section of the Robot Proof Recruiter, which I can reference, which is look like somebody wants to connect with. Yeah, talking to, right? So people make such a big thing about followers. Oh, God, I'm trying to increase my follower count. Okay, cool. But if I get a connection request from you, you got 0 content, no picture, or a dated one
what's
like that.
with the pictures going on? There's a definite thing going on that people are deliberately hiding their picture from their second, third line network on LinkedIn, which I find strange.
Agree.
Who knows?
Yeah, I'm like, this must be a spam bot.
But to the point of kind of like you say, the social media side, it's like sometimes I think it's just getting somebody to start creating content and sharing it. I think there's almost this mental hurdle sometimes of what do I share, and what's my tone of voice, and that can almost act as a blocker for them to actually do anything at all. But once they start to get into a bit of a rhythm in terms of the sort of things they want to talk about and share, I think it's a good starting point. And I think it's healthier as well, simply because then there's almost a starting point for a conversation as opposed to, hey, I've got a job. Do you want to speak to me? Which most people are just like, that's sales. And, what are we going to connect on? What level are we connecting on?
But you can become a thought leader in your own industry, whether it's engineering, people, sales, customer experience. If you're posting content about your company, getting your presence out there, then when you actually post content about the topic you're passionate about or the field you're interested in, people will listen and interact, and you'll get more followers and connection requests from people in that same field to have a more productive conversation with, or to come on podcasts, or attract recruiters who might be looking to fill talent roles.
I think there is this misconception as well that you have to have an enormous following. No. So I'm forever chucked in those lists, I call them clickbait, of influencers in talent acquisition. Sorry, it just makes me gag a bit. And my following isn't enormous.
It's genuine.
I can't even actually think how many I've got. I'm now going to look, but it's like 25,000 or something on LinkedIn and maybe 15 on Twitter. It's not, but they're recruiters. Like, I've been quite specific about who I've connected to. So I think it's that as well.
With employee engagement, right? Like, you care about your followers, you have engaging conversations, you take the time to like and comment on their posts.
Yeah.
You accept their connection requests. There are several people on the platform that don't do that.
Yeah, this is true.
I always think about the power of a smile as well in your photos, because we did a bit of a test on kind of a social post around a job opportunity, and on one picture the individual was a little bit more concentrated and focused, and one they're just smiling. We got so much more impressions and engagement on the post where the individual was smiling as opposed to the other, and it's kind of, and you have to think about the speed with which things are coming through a feed, right? It's kind of like people engage with things that make them happy, that, kind of make them smile, that are quite fun.
But it's really interesting. Sorry, I'm off topic, but everyone has to read this book. I'm reading Johan Hari's book, Stolen Focus, and it is terrifying how these platforms are actually set. So you could start on YouTube watching one video that's like cat video, and you could end up watching something really, really negative if you keep watching the suggested. And it's the same on Facebook, etc. The algorithms are set to get us to stay, but to actually watch worse and worse stuff. Wow. So I agree with what you're saying. In general, I think we prefer happy content, but the algorithms aren't doing that because it doesn't hook us enough. You see, we get a happy moment and we leave. They want us to, so you have to read that book, people. You have to. It's terrifying.
You get me cat videos on Instagram Reel. I'm there for hours. Seriously, just scrolling up. And penguins. Penguins and cats.
They've
Amazing.
totally got me hooked on reels. They definitely know what I like to watch. It's dreadful. I won't do them, but I do watch them. That's sort of a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Can I steal in? Because I've got a poll running. I just wanted to kind of ask Jordan this question and just see what her immediate response is. So where is it? Let me get to it so I can actually read it properly as opposed to slightly fudge it. Okay, so in your opinion, which of these actions best describe human-centered hiring? Ready? Investing time, building relationships, offering total transparency, or actively listening. So if you think about human-centered hiring.
Why does it have to be one of those four, not all four? I mean,
I would like a choice, Katrina.
Oh, you're so annoying. I actually saw that poll and rolled on by.
From my perspective, this might be a cop-out, but I would say building relationships, because to me, that also includes the transparency and active listening piece. I think it's really hard to do that without those things too.
There's the answer. Winning.
See,
cool.
you were
Thank
just
you.
expecting some sneaky psychology behind it instead of just making it a really easy poll.
Oh, I was just curious. I just like to float it out there and see what folks have got to say. It's it's like you say, there's an argument, and there's definitely credibility for each one of those formulating that overall human-centered hiring. But when you split it down, you start to understand which one people align to more. So I was just curious. That's all.
Interesting.
And it feeds into the onboarding process as well, right? In terms of
totally.
kind of what builds an experience. So we've talked about transparency, investing time. And it's kind of building a relationship, because that's ultimately what you're trying to do. You're trying to build that runway for a relationship as they join the business, and you're actively listening to the feedback. So it can be applied to any point of that overall end-to-end journey, right, all the way through to offboarding, where some would say that maybe kind of actively listening and really maintaining that relationship is equally important, right, and investing that time. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
That's now Jordan's entire job, isn't it? Because it's the entire employee experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
So big responsibility.
Yeah.
So is this a stretch role for you as well? Is it like exciting? What will you be learning and growing?
Yeah, it is. So excited to stay again, sort of in the vicinity of onboarding, so I can still join in the facilitation rotation and all of those things. We have, we're building a company-wide strategy for virtual engagement. So how do we leverage company-wide events? I think we did a virtual holiday party. For me, the holidays are sort of like low-hanging fruit. You can always do a Valentine's Day thing, a New Year's thing, but how do we really—
Not Valentine's, you can have the rest, not the one. It's so naff. No.
How can we be more intentional about the virtual interactions we have? Leveraging teams and managers and all the things.
So how do you do that with your people who just are like, oh, I'm tired of being online, I don't want to— have you had that as an issue? I hear that a lot. I do. I think it's because recruiters do spend so much time screening online. So
Zoom fatigue is real, and we acknowledge that. I think we've utilized the tool called Gather Rounds, which is like Zoom a bit, but it's sort of like table topics in Zoom mashed up. So it's a new UI. The user face is different. You can play games. It sends you into breakout spaces based on the games you want to play. And when you're in the room, the cards sort of shuffle themselves. So it takes the work out of setting up an icebreaker session or even a team brainstorming check-in. There are lots of creative uses for the tool, and it's different. You're still on camera, so that doesn't totally take away that component of it, but it is something new and refreshing, I think, in that sense.
What was it called?
Gather Round.
Gather Round.
Yes. Number one fan, y'all. I think for onboarding specifically,
Center commission.
Yeah, getting 20 new hires to share a fun fact for their first day is boring. So we put them all in groups, excuse me, and get them talking about, if you won the lottery, what would you do with the money? Are you a mountains person or a beach person? And it has lots of cool features, so we love it. And you can host a whole meeting on there. Managers use it for brainstorming or product demos. It's been very, very cool. But yeah, and I think if they're tired of being on camera, we like Google Jamboard, we like Google Slides. So if it's something you can send in a Slack channel, can we do some Slack engagement? Can you post a picture of your workspace? Can you post a picture of like your window outside? So there are other ways you can be intentional about virtual engagement that don't necessarily involve Zoom or being on camera.
I like that. That's really
I was
interesting.
just immediately thinking about augmented reality in onboarding, and kind of how that could be utilized to kind of, like you say, gamify. I don't think you'd want to go full virtual reality, because you did a virtual reality event, didn't you, Katrina? How was that?
Oh God,
as
I
an
never
experience?
forget. So, you know, my very elderly Labrador was like in his last few months, and he just started panting at my feet. So I'm in this virtual reality, lost in the experience, but all I can hear is him panting at my feet, needing me. It was quite a weird experience. But I found it a bit nerve-wracking, weirdly. Like just I was fine once we got going, but I was a bit reluctant to do the networky bit. I didn't want to just suddenly land next to somebody and start talking to them, which is really odd. But it just felt like a scary thing to jump across the room compared to, I don't particularly like walking up to people, let's be honest.
Well, I don't know. I mean, in networking situations, you do that, right? So it's kind of, is virtual reality kind of almost a step away from what we want to achieve, which is actually kind of more engagement. I think the augmented reality could be fun, like you know, kind of a kind of treasure hunt type thing, or kind of team building things, which could be kind of fun, as long as everybody's kind of relatively comfortable with using the tech to do it. Otherwise, you just have people sitting there going, I can't do this. I'm just going to watch.
Yeah.
So is that the same, by the way? The augmented to virtual, is it the same? I have no idea.
I was thinking about augmented in the context of, you remember when they went wild for that, like Pokemon type thing, where you had to go searching for them and stuff like that. Right. Yeah, so you can actually utilize it kind of on mobile and that. So could be quite fun. But yeah,
right now in Nashville it'd be brilliant.
I know. People will be slipping all over the ice outside.
Is it as entertaining as Seattle in the ice, or?
Yes, because people in the South don't know how to drive because it never gets this cold or snows. So we embarrass ourselves a lot.
It seems like they don't grit the roads. I mean, here they grit the roads. I appreciate, though, if it has just snowed, it is a problem. But we don't seem to have quite so many problems with cars sliding all over the place. It's,
Yes, exactly.
Of course, it's a lot smaller here.
So I think sorry, go on, Katrina.
No, I just realized I didn't let you answer the question. I just amused myself with the fact there's a snowstorm in Nashville. Sorry, because I think Nashville, I think warm. So I'm a bit like snowstorm. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking Nashville in winter in the snow in Crocs. Now, how much of a challenge is that, right?
Hey, I can't give them up, even in the snow. I'm rocking with Crocs and socks. It's the way to go.
So, in terms of onboarding,
no comment.
are there any trends that you're looking at? You're like, hey, let's see how that perhaps develops before we implement that at Calendly. Is there anything that maybe you're just kind of, that sounds quite fun, but I'd like to sort of see a bit more data and or maybe a few more kind of comments on whether that works or not in the sort of onboarding space?
I think to your comment on gamification, there's a desire to fit more into the experience and even include it on e-learnings or an LMS system. And it's not that I disagree. I just want to be careful and selective about what we're telling new hires in their first month, week, 90 days, year, just so that they really can get their need to knows. And like, I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the context of onboarding and starting a job. Yeah. And so sales is super important, but unless they're on the sales team, can we just give them a brief overview of your team and then sort of build on that knowledge later? So I think I want to see more research on what those need to knows are and or what other content is important. Like, is it DEI? Is it unconscious bias? Like, what other things can we start to weave in that don't feel overwhelming, that help contribute to the culture, that are fun and engaging, so that we can maximize the time we have in person or on screen together, doing some interactive and then supplementing with e-learning before I'm just like putting a course on there to put a course on there.
And also because gamification just doesn't work for everybody.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm writing another book, which is actually about my childhood trauma and everything I've thrown at it. And I found while I was doing that, I'm what's called a highly sensitive person, which is about 15, 20% of the population. And we're not motivated by gamification. I was reading this research and went, that explains so much. When everyone else is competing, I'm like, whatever, knock yourselves out.
It's overwhelming. Yeah, it's overwhelming. So even we do like trivia on 3 days out of the first week at Calendly using Kahoot, just to like a quick quiz, 10 questions. And some people get super into it. And some people are like, I could care less.
Yeah, I know. We all are so peculiar, aren't we? It's brilliant.
And I think this is not a question. It's just more a thought process in terms of if you think about kind of neurodiverse individuals and how they would like to be onboarded, not how they are onboarded. And that you're almost creating perhaps to a certain degree a different experience and pathway for that individual or those individuals as opposed to, and that's one thing that I think perhaps, might be slightly more challenging for startups, smaller companies, but there are still ways of approaching that and being sensitive to it and, kind of, if nothing else, asking the question, do you like video content versus text versus audio? What's your preferred way of kind of consuming content and or learning? And I think those are really simple things that perhaps there's a danger that smaller companies will be like, we haven't got the time to design that. You don't have to design it. It's just asking a simple question up front that acknowledges somebody's preference, which can actually help them.
Yeah, or just providing just like the diversity of options, right? Like, can we build courses or content that offer that? Or as a facilitator, if you're doing a breakout activity, having the group decide who's going to come back and be the spokesperson, or offering reactions in Zoom as opposed to just like calling on someone randomly, because that might make them clam up or say the wrong thing. So again, giving them different ways to engage with the content so that they're exposed to everything. You might see this here in your role, and then them figuring out which ones they jive with, so then they can advocate to their manager, hey, this is how I best learn. This is how I best communicate. Because hopefully all managers are having those conversations about team norms and expectations and how they can live their best life at work.
And that's actually good culturally as well. I did a piece of work for the Singapore government many years ago, and I'm doing training, and they're not asking me any questions. And then in the break, they would ask one by one, and you kind of get them lined up, and you're like, I just want a cup of tea. But and it was because they don't want to show up the other person if they have more knowledge. It was like really quite fascinating, and so that would also counter some of those. But I think these days as well, if you've done a video, you can strip the audio out, you can get the text auto created almost, and then you could just have a different tag in your marketing, and then it would send out whichever one they suited them. So many tools to make it easy, aren't there?
I know, yeah.
Very cool. Are there any fun stories from your onboarding experience? Now, this is you probably can't comment. Actually,
today it's awesome.
No, not at all. It's just kind of like you tend to discover things about people when they're onboarding, preferences and that sort of thing. I don't know if there was any kind of really. No, that's an unfair question actually, because it might actually implicate you in terms of people that are currently in the business. All I will say is I remember coming onto a very number of years ago to an interview to talk to somebody about kind of onboarding, and they had a lot of cuddly toys in the background. I mean, lots. I was like, okay,
just checking the dog hasn't left any.
you're kind of into kind of collecting cuddly. Oh yeah, and it was an absolute passion for them, which I thought was quite surprising, but quite fascinating at the same time. You get that window into people's lives when it's not just the information you're presenting them about the company. It's almost asking them to open up and share a bit more about them that you may not have discovered through the interview process. And I think it comes back to that point around kind of unconscious bias, where a hiring manager might have sat in front of them and gone, oh my God, we've made the wrong hire. This is, and it's kind of, how do you find that balance?
I love it. I don't know if I have any like specific stories. I just think the groups that I have fun with, or the people that I find memorable, interact with me as a human, because I've built that rapport and trust, which to me, more of a compliment to me, I think. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I did it this time, right? Or they give me like playlist suggestions because we will listen to music before we get started, or they'll share stories with me or Slack me and ask me questions, or they're not afraid to ask questions. I try to say the only stupid question is the one you don't ask. So if you're I just said it and you can't remember, like this is your get out of jail free card, like ask me anything this week. I'm here to support you. And so I feel like when I've done that, I've won. And then we use Gather Round on our second day, and I ask them to share something that sparks joy in their space. So sometimes we get kids, we get dogs, we get coffee mugs, we get Lego collections. So maybe not stuffed animals yet, but they show me all kinds of cool things about their space, and it's a window into their personality.
I think it's one of the joyous things that the pandemic did break down so many walls for that as well. Like, you know, you and I both have dogs around us. Glenn's got a cat somewhere, and you can see like into the house. Like I'm like, oh, he's got a new plant behind him, you know, and it's that thing out of seeing is quite, it's different. It's nice in that respect.
We did a guilty pleasures playlist that everybody contributed to. That was good fun. That's always good fun. That gets everybody, and then you get to play that in kind of the office and space. That's always good fun because then you're like, oh, who chose this? And they're like, me.
Is that like you?
We share like funny Zoom stories. If somebody has like a mishap or their favorite place that they've taken a Zoom call, just to sort of like build camaraderie and laugh together. Because again, at the start of the pandemic, there were people like taking their computer to the bathroom and not realizing their camera was on. And so if folks want to share funny stories, it just gets us laughing and more comfortable.
Exactly. And there's a fun one where people have obviously done a lot of Zoom-based quizzes, and they've changed their name for the purpose of the quiz. I had one guy come onto an interview, and I can't repeat it, but I was just like, so you were on a Zoom quiz over the weekend? He was like, oh my God. Good fun stuff, you know?
I think what you're saying, and actually I quite like your mug with the people person, just in case you forget. It's but I think it's just being real. Well, Danny put it over there as well. So he's a brutally honest person, and I am as well. But I think it's just being real, just being. But I think that takes a lot. I think that is still quite scary for some people. I think we've got work to do in that regard. Yeah. But you know, thank you for like flying the flag for that, because I think the people you're onboarding feel happy to ask you questions because you're being very transparent and open and just, this is me, you know.
Yeah, I think you owe that to yourself. Before I joined Calendly, I went through a few interview processes, and I actually met with the chief people officer of a consulting organization, and she was very transparent with me, which I appreciated, but she said, I don't know if we're fun enough for you. So I want to make sure that this is a good fit. And that to me was like, one, thank you for saying that. Two, you're probably not fun enough for me. And I want to bring my whole self to work. Yeah. And this is my personality. So I just, I would encourage everyone to try to step outside your comfort zone to do that, because you'll do yourself a disservice and potentially end somewhere where it's not a fit.
I can't see you in a consulting firm. Don't ever do that. Ever. Even a small one. No.
My dad didn't count it. So he encouraged me to be a business major, and lo and behold, I ended up in HR-ish anyway.
Yeah. My father was as well. Well, and then he was a lecturer in accounting. It was like the double whammy of really boring topic, and I'm going to tell you how to do something 3 times.
Yes,
even though I know that you got it on the first time.
My mum was a hairdresser.
She must be horrified.
Exactly. She's like, that is once every 6 months.
But just think how much money you save that way.
Half yearly haircut.
Jordan, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the easiest? Is it LinkedIn, or what's your preference?
LinkedIn is great. I love to connect on there and respond to DMs or connection requests or follow requests. I engage with my folks. I don't just
Do you respond to people? How rude.
So please reach out. I'm happy to connect. Coffee chats, chat about onboarding, people, things, Nike or Adidas, whatever.
Well, I mean, that could be hotly contested, to be fair, Jordan.
Is it Adidas or Adidas, you see? That would be a whole conversation for me. I've never heard it called Adidas.
I believe it's
until I met people in the States.
Yeah, I believe it is Adidas, because it's German, isn't it? It's a German company, because you've got, well, anyway, I digress. I could go into the history of it, but you know.
I love it.
It's all good. Jordan, thank you again. Absolutely amazing conversation.
Thank you,
Totally
Jordan.
loved it. We went off topic, of course, because we love
Fine.
to do that. But thank you so much. And thank you everyone who tuned in. We appreciate all your comments and etc.
100%.
All right. Take care, guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Bye.